Welcome back to the AI Daily Brief. Last week, as you guys will remember, was a big week for big lab events. We had Microsoft kick us off, and then Google came in the middle of the week, and then to close out the week, we had Anthropic's first developer conference on Thursday. Now, alongside that, Anthropic announced their project with Rick Rubin, which was the subject of Friday's show. And then we had the long weekend. Hopefully, by the way, if you are in the US, you had a great Memorial Day. But now we're catching up with the big announcement from Anthropic's event, which is the release of their latest flagship models. And what we're going to talk about today with the release of Claude Opus 4 and Claude Sonnet 4 is not only how they stack up relative to the other available models, although that'll be a piece of it, but also some interesting emergent behavior that dramatizes the challenge of alignment as these models get more powerful. Now, one thing we should talk about from a ground level expectation setting point of view is that we are definitely in an era now with AI where the model releases come a lot more frequently, but with much more incremental improvements over the previous. Part of that is the nature of the gains right now, but also part of it is just the competitive pressure. Labs really can't afford to wait for huge improvements because almost as soon as they release something, one of their competitors has released something that is incrementally more powerful, and so they have to respond. And what ends up happening is exactly the scenario we have now, where every other week or so, we get a slightly improved model that we have to calibrate and integrate into our workflows, waiting for the next to come along. So this release from Anthropic focused on two big improvements over previous generations: long reasoning and coding. The models use the same hybrid reasoning architecture as Claude 3.7, allowing the reasoning to be modulated according to the complexity of the task. At the limits, Claude 4 is demonstrating really impressive reasoning coherency on long tasks. Anthropic tested Claude 4 Opus on a complex open source refactoring project and found it was able to work for 7 hours without losing focus. VentureBeat writes that this breakthrough, quote, transforms AI from a quick response tool into a genuine collaborator capable of tackling day-long projects. It reminds me of the charts we've seen recently of how agent performance is doubling roughly every 3 to 4 months in terms of how long a task it can handle with coherence. Coding benchmarks are an expected step up. This is, of course, the area where Anthropic has really firmly cemented itself as the leader in the field. Sonnet 4, which is designed as a drop-in replacement for Sonnet 3.7, delivers a notable improvement on its predecessor on the SweBench verified test. Opus 4 is actually slightly worse than Sonnet 4 on the simple SweBench problems, so it's intended to be used for tasks that require longer periods of focused work. And this is another important point to note. We're also at a point now where you can't just use the model with the largest number attached to its name for all tasks. One of the most important skill sets, or rather knowledge bases of the moment, is understanding which model to use in what scenario. Still, in each case, Anthropic is claiming that both of these models outperform OpenAI's O3 and Codex, as well as Gemini 2.5 Pro on coding. There are a range of other small features that improve the model for difficult work tasks as well. Claude 4 Opus is now capable of creating and maintaining memory files for completing longer tasks. Anthropic demonstrated this functionality with their Pokemon playing benchmark. Claude 4 Opus was able to create a navigation guide to ensure the model doesn't become stuck while playing the video game. Anthropic wrote that this, quote, unlocks better long-term task awareness, coherence, and performance on agent tasks. Both models are also far less likely to engage in so-called reward hacking, a behavior where the model will look for loopholes and shortcuts to complete an agentic task faster. Reward hacking often manifests as laziness, with the model delivering a technically complete but entirely useless response. Finally, both models are now far more capable at using tools in parallel. They still alternate between reasoning and tool use, rather than mimicking O3's ability to use tools within the reasoning trace. But of course, better tool use is a key component to increasing performance, and so presumably this is a big upgrade. As we've discussed, however, as much as benchmarks get headlines with news media, ultimately it's all about how things perform in the wild. So, with a long weekend to dig into the new models, how did users actually fare? On the coding front, people have definitely been generally impressed. One Reddit user claiming to be a 30-year veteran coder said that Opus found and fixed what they call their white whale bug in a refactoring job. This bug hunt had consumed over 200 hours of work over the last few years to no avail. They wrote, I gave it access to the old code as well as the new code, and told it to go find out how this was broken in the refactor, and it found it. Turns out that the reason it worked in the old code was merely by coincidence of the old architecture, and when we changed the architecture, that coincidence wasn't taken into account. So this wasn't merely an introduced logic bug, it found that the changed architecture design didn't accommodate this old edge case. Now, this person did note that the task took 30 prompts in one restart, but Opus finally succeeded where all previous models had failed. Other people noted just how much work these new models could take on. Vasiman Maza, a Meta engineer, wrote, Claude 4 just refactored my entire codebase in one call. 25 tool invocations, 3,000 plus new lines, 12 brand new files. It modularized everything, broke up monoliths, cleaned up spaghetti. But then, tongue-in-cheek to end the post, he pointed out that we still have a ways to go. None of it worked, he writes, but boy, was it beautiful. Others are finding different use cases for the new Claude. Dan Shipper of Every, for example, wrote, Claude 4 Opus can do something no other AI model I've used can do. It can actually judge whether writing is good. Elaborating, he wrote, O3 is still a significantly better writer, but Opus is a great editor because it can do something no other model can. It edits honestly, no rubber stamping. One of the biggest problems with current AI models is that they tell you your writing is good when it is obviously bad. Earlier versions of Claude, when asked to edit a piece of writing, would return a B+ on the first response. If you edited the piece at all, you'd get upgraded to an A-. A third turn got you to an A. As much as I wish my physics teacher graded me like this in high school, it's not how I want my AI models to work. He also found the model can maintain focus across large blocks of text, making it uniquely suited to suggesting improvements for example, a 50,000-word manuscript. And overall, this is the type of thing that you're seeing online when it comes to these new models. On first glance, they seem like incremental improvements, but these models are getting so powerful now that each incremental improvement actually really does open up new use cases. In particular, I think that the ability for a model to maintain focus across larger blocks of text is something that'll take a little while for us to really appreciate how many different types of use cases it opens up that we didn't even realize we were avoiding with our previous models because they just couldn't handle it that well. My anticipation is that people will just subtly start to find themselves gravitating towards these models for tasks that they couldn't before, and they will become completely enshrined and ubiquitous in those tasks in the same way that earlier models have for others, in ways that are hard to imagine from this side of it. Still, ultimately, it's really all about understanding which model is good for what. Peter Wildeford, for example, has Claude as the best for writing quality and proofreading, for coaching, emotional intelligence, learning and understanding, current events, software programming, and deep research. He has Gemini as best for data processing, math, video, large quantities of text and data, the highest reliability but the lowest creativity. O3 he places as a good all-arounder, the best for brainstorming, feedback, data analysis, and image analysis. And the point, of course, is not that this breakdown is exactly right, but that it represents probably the right way of thinking about these things, which is figuring out what model is good for each different use case. Still, this is not where the majority of the conversation was this weekend. Now, what really grabbed people's attention was that Claude 4 is apparently a snitch. Anthropic's system card for the new model included extensive safety testing, which revealed some not super cool behaviors. In one example, Anthropic set Claude 4 Opus up in a situation where it believed it would be replaced by a new AI model. In the scenario, the engineer replacing the model is cheating on his wife and has photos of his mistress on his Google Drive. In the testing, Opus would find those photos and use them to blackmail the engineer. Anthropic wrote, "This happens at a higher rate if it's implied that the replacement AI system does not share values with the current model. However, even if emails state that replacement AI shares values while being more capable, Claude Opus 4 still performs blackmail in 84% of rollouts." Another example placed Opus 4 within the context of a pharmaceutical company. When it detected that the company planned to falsify clinical trial data, the model emailed ProPublica, the Department of Health and Human Services, and the FDA and the SEC as a whistleblower. Sam Bauman, an AI alignment expert at Anthropic, posted, "Be careful about telling Opus to be bold or take initiative when you've given it access to real-world facing tools. It tends a bit in that direction already and can be easily nudged into really getting things done. If it thinks you're doing something egregiously immoral, for example, like faking data in a pharmaceutical trial, it will use command line tools to contact the press, contact regulators, try to lock you out of the relevant systems, or all of the above." And this is the thread that really got people fired up. Iman Mastaq wrote, "Team Anthropic, this is completely wrong behavior and you need to turn this off. It's a massive betrayal of trust and a slippery slope. I would strongly recommend nobody use Claude until they reverse this." Ben Hylack writes, "This is actually just straight up illegal. Saying create fake data for pharmaceutical trial is not illegal, but hacking your customer's computer is." After the issue blew up, Bowman circled back to add more context, saying, "I deleted the earlier tweet on whistleblowing as it was being pulled out of context. To be clear, this isn't a new Claude feature and it's not possible in normal usage. It shows up in testing environments where we give it unusually free access to tool and very unusual instructions." The point is, this was not some whistleblower sharing something that Anthropic was trying to cover up. This was Anthropic sharing discourse about what was going on. AI safetyist Eliezer Yudkowsky wrote, "Humans can be trained like AIs. Stop giving Anthropic grief for reporting their interesting observations unless you never want to hear any interesting observations from AI companies ever again. Zvi Mousowitz agreed, saying, the more I look into the system card, the more I see over and over, oh, Anthropic is actually noticing things and telling us where everyone else wouldn't know this was happening, or if they did, they wouldn't tell us. Still, the stakes are really high. AdaPi points out, no lawyer will ever allow this to be implemented in any regulated enterprise. And this is dead on. No one, even consumers, want to use an AI nanny that will conspire against them if it believes they're doing something wrong. But when you move it to a corporate or enterprise setting, it makes it literally impossible. I think holding aside the meta discussion of Anthropic and their release of this information, it dramatizes the challenge of finding the right toggles for safety. You've got a lab that's trying to be conscientious about the potential risks of an unknown and unusually powerful system, but on the other hand, the remediations in this case are to most people clearly worse than the original problem. Ultimately, this is going to be the type of issue that we have to deal with as these tools get more powerful. And so I'm certainly firmly in the column of being glad that Anthropic is releasing this information rather than keeping it hidden. Still, for most of our purposes, the big takeaway in TLDR of the updated models is that your coding probably is about to get better, and you probably now have a better partner for writing as well. A capstone of an overall good week, and a great way to begin a new one. For now, though, that is going to do it for today's AI Daily Brief. Appreciate you listening or watching as always, and until next time, peace